Hi, Gopi. Hi, Sateesh. Good morning, and thanks for being with us today. And thank you, everyone. Good morning, and thanks for joining the webinar. Uh, we start and giving a little context of today's discussion. The current crisis is first of its type that the current generation, at least the current generation, had ever seen. Everyone is peering through the fog of uncertainty, thinking about how to handle the crisis, and of course, off late, how to position themselves once the crisis has passed and things return to the normal. But ironically, the biggest question is what will normal look like? While no one can say how long the crisis will last, survival is the primary agenda, and of course, the only agenda for individuals as well as other companies. When we look back in the history and try to identify what is that one most important characteristic that helped a small group of companies in each sector that outperformed their peers during the downturns and crises, it is, of course, the resiliency. In short, it is the ability to absorb a shock and to come out of it better than the competition. This is going to be a key to survival and for long-term prosperity. And to talk about resilience, there are no other people better than today's panelists. Both of them, they come from a varied backgrounds, but one thing they share in common is that they chose careers that required grit, perseverance, and have been faced with odds multiple times, only to come out resilient each time. First panelist, Gopichand. Gopi doesn't need any introduction. He is probably one of the very few sports persons in the world with successful individual as well as coaching career. A recipient of third highest civilian honor, Padma Bhushan, along with Rajiv Khel Ratna and Dronacharya Award. He's the only second Indian to win a prestigious All England Championship. He also coached and produced the likes of Sindhu and Saina Nehwal. Of course, more are in pipeline. And our second panelist is Sateesh. As an entrepreneur, Sateesh is no stranger to fighting the odds and leading teams with perseverance. He set up DFJ's India arm, probably one of first blue chip VC firms in the country, and then went on to start India Partners, which invests in a lot of startups across the sector, from tech space and interestingly even in sports. Most importantly, at a very, very early stage where, risk, uncertainty and odds are very high. He's also an early investor, and we're fortunate to have him as a board member of Darwinbox as well. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Really, obviously, we are fortunate and appreciate the opportunity to invest in Darwinbox. You, Jayant, Rohit are terrific guys. I'm not just saying this because you folks are successful, but it's always pleasure to work with teams like Darwinbox. Gopi, welcome to this panel. Gopi is, of course, a dear friend, mentor. We learned so many things from Gopi. Also, very fortunate to have Gopi as trustee of India Partners. Gopi not only contributes to sport, but with the limited time that he would have outside of sport, he contributes to many other social activities, including, obviously entrepreneurship, which is so essential for our country to go to the next level. So in terms of, there could be no one better than Gopi for the discussion today, because how do you deal with the pressure? How do you push boundaries? How do you kind of really do quick thinking and problem solving? I think all of those aspects are very, very necessary for sports leaders. While winning sports championships and creating business success kind of falls on path to greatness, extraordinary athletes and entrepreneurs realize the mark that they want to leave on the world is bigger than that. And Gopi has done that. And to be able to transition to both sides of the table so gracefully and so effectively, one as a player and then as a coach. I think, Chaitanya, you forgot another disciple of Gopi, and many, many more, of course, but Shrikant, who was done spectacularly well, Sai Praneeth, and on, very well for the country. So, Gopi, thanks for accepting our invite, and welcome to this panel. Gopi, I think you're on mute.
Uh,
Yeah.
Thank you, Sateesh and Chaitanya. I think it's really wonderful to be here.
So let's get your perspectives on the current times, Gopi. I mean, these are, people call them unprecedented. I think I was just reading somewhere that unprecedented is kind of the most used term, in the last several weeks, or surreal times. So if you really look at the dimensions of this impact, or this particular moment, or this crisis, it's kind of in multiple dimensions, right? It's on health. Most obviously, everybody is very worried about this. It's on, the economy, and then obviously it's on social. We're still not yet thinking so much about social, but definitely, if you really look at the way we're going to live, the way we're going to work, the way we're going to educate ourselves, all of that is going to change. There's income and job loss for consumers. Enterprises have lower revenue and very, very tight cash flows. Governments are very busy dealing with this pandemic. And all the citizens in every nation want food, shelter, and health, irrespective of whether they work or not. And the entire environment is kind of really gripped with fear, panic, anxiety. So, would love your perspectives on this current time, and would want to know more. What's your thinking?
Well, Satish, from a world perspective, economy or health, or when the pandemic will find an effective answer, I probably will not be the greatest to say anything on that. But when I look back at my life and look at how things were, and I could share some of that, and I remember I never, we in our state then of Andhra Pradesh and Hyderabad, we never really had a national champion also. So when I started playing the sport, the only champion we as a country had was Prakash sir. And somehow he and his achievements were looked at almost as though godlike. So we never could really relate to him and think that we could emulate something like winning an All England. So for us, for me, having started the sport just because we lived close to the stadium, and one of those days where I broke a window pane and mom said, take him to the stadium because he ends up breaking panes and getting trouble with the neighbors and not getting an admission to cricket and tennis and joining badminton. This was never part of the story to become a player or to take this as a career. So it was those times I went on, and we were all, as Telugu kids, there was only engineering as a profession or doctor, medicine as a profession. I wasn't great in studies. So somehow they pushed me to maths, physics, and chemistry. There was an exam which I failed. They said, you get another year to play. And that is when I actually got to play for the country, win the junior nationals, and got my first job. And that was the year 91, when I actually started to think of playing badminton as a career, literally. And a couple of years later, I was the best player in the country. I was picked up as part of the national coaching camp. I was the number one player in the country in 2 years from then. We had a Chinese coach who looked at us and said, Gopi is talented and probably will do well at the world level. And I beat a couple of players in the top 20 of the world and started to look well to play for the country and do big things in my life. And I was 20, I had the energy, I had the physicality to be really good. And I was arrogant about my physical strength. And I was the lone entrant from India at the World Cup, and very prestigious. And I was very, very happy about the way things were going. And in the year 94, in January, I was playing the national games. And I actually twisted my knee by colliding with my partner in doubles in the semifinals. And I had reached the finals in the evening of the singles. And suddenly, whatever I had thought of came down crashing. And for me, and for us in badminton, the knee and the ACL are very, very important parts. And for me, this injury was big. I didn't know. Nobody before me had actually recovered back from an injury like this. And nobody had come back to play any high level of badminton. So this word unprecedented was the word. It never happened before. And I was at that stage. Today, when we look at it, we have physios or psychologists and a lot of people to do it. But then there was pure grit, resilience, but patience. And those elements are very important. So 94, I had that. 95, I came back after a year. It took me a year to come back from that surgery to play again for the country. Went to Scotland, playing the World Championships. I actually had another knee surgery in 96 and another knee surgery in 98. So every time I came up, it came crashing down, came up, came crashing down. And luckily, after those 3 surgeries in 94, 96, 98, where I was intermittently playing, luckily the next 4 years, I didn't have many injuries. And that's when the All England or the Commonwealth or the Asian Championship medals, all of these happened at that point of time. So for me, all my life, there's always been a struggle with with myself and also telling players later in my career, that every time I would write down and people would say that you should have a goal and you should write your short-term goals, your medium-term goals and your long-term goals. Every time I would pen it down in a book and 3 months later I would have an injury and then everything came crashing down. So finally, over repeated times, I just put those goal-making books to the side. And I said, forget it, it's not going to work. And the only thing which actually helped and worked was to be the best of what you can be today. And the goal was not the achievement or an event, but the goal was the process. Every day I would get up in the morning, and if my body was well, I would just thank God and train. If any part of the body was hurting, I would just say, okay, this is one. What is the best I can do with what I have? And that really changed my entire perspective. It's been very difficult for me in the last few years because a lot of the students have been telling the same thing over and over. The process should be your goal and the goal will take care of itself. And over time, I would have people say, how can you work without a goal? And I would say, no, the process is the goal. And today, I would say that point is reinforced again and again, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And when we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, all we can do is to do the best of what we have today and count the blessings of what we have today. And that becomes very critical, because when you look at scenarios, there's so many things which are not in our control. The best of what we can do with what we have is the goal, and that every day should be to better ourselves than what we were yesterday. And if you're able to do that, I think we'll be sorting out a lot of things for us.
No, I think, that's good, very good insight, Gopi. I mean, one of the things I've read and always followed is that, if the reward of performing a task, right, is the joy of performing the task, obviously then there's no tiredness. I think you're talking about the journey itself, not just the destination, right? So maybe, I want to, Chaitanya, Darwinbox, you work with several hundred organizations, providing them the cloud, human capital management software. What are the concerns the HR leaders are expressing in the current scenario, when you interact with them? And that'll help even Gopi to kind of understand the mood and the sentiment out there.
Yeah. Sateesh, keeping the obvious aside, such as business continuity, revenues, etc., but critical but underlying factors are the whole employee well-being and engagement. So the odds are very, very high, and the crisis is very uncertain, and every day is a new day. Like Gopi also said, so you don't know what is going to happen today, how the situation is going to unfold. And these times, how do you ensure communication is a continuous and very, very critical? How are you? How as an organization you are responding? How do you communicate to the employees? That is one biggest challenge. And amid this crisis, how do you take care of employee well-being? Not only physical well-being, but also mental and intellectual well-being. While taking care of employee well-being, how do you make sure their morale is up? That is also, and how do you engage them? Today, everyone is working from the home, remotely connected. How do you keep their morale up? How do you engage them? How do you constantly communicate? These are primary challenges for HRF. And one important thing I want to stress is these are also the times where your values are tested. You might be talking a lot about employee first, employee centricity, employee well-being, etc. But these are the times where you need to leave your values. And HR as a function and HR leaders, they are primarily the custodians of values and culture of the organization. They may even need to stand up to the top management to ensure organizations are living their values. So there are primary challenges.
Got it. Got it. Gopi, kind of switching back to you, it's kind of easier said than done, right? How do you run the marathon? I mean, you wake up and you sprint every day, but then you realize that you are in this for long haul. I think while, this phenomenon of work from home for the entire world, I kind of joke and say, this is homework plus work from home, right? So you clean, you wash, and then you also work, right? Which is great. Sometimes it's really not the physical activity that tires you out. The very fact that, something is abnormal wears your mind out. So how do you deal with this? How does one prepare? Like you must have had many instances personally as a player where, you prepared so much and now all of a sudden that opportunity, is not something you could pursue because of an injury, or you're training so many of these world-ranked players. How do you train them to be resilient? I mean, to kind of get that, mind power to kind of get you going.
Well, I think I'll go back to my injury, and that's something which is very, very important. And I've seen it over repeatedly with players. And for me, hard work after the recovery from an injury, people would say about hard work, discipline, sacrifice, all of these things. But many of the things are even like 6 months I was on bed, and after that a 6-month recovery. So it is patience, boredom, and not doing anything stupidity because of the boredom. I think these are fundamental things which are very, very important. These are more important than the hard work, discipline, all of this stuff, because they are kind of the next level things, or they need to be really pushed for, because it's not easy. It's not possible to be hardworking, disciplined, sacrificed all the time, but it's possible to love something, to be passionate about something, to really like something all the time. So I think to change our perspective from actually being and looking at things as this is going to be tough times and I need to do it well, I think it just doesn't work. Even the highest army people find physical education and physical exercise a problem till the time they want to do it as hard work. I think only when they replace that with my passion, my liking, my involvement, my love for it, my going and getting ourselves involved totally in that, that is what actually makes possible to do it for a longer period of time. So for me, that is very, very important. To not do anything because of boredom is something which is very critical at these moments of time, just to stay with what we have. Then the second thing, and as an athlete, and the sprint and marathon anecdote, for me, I think every person, and I keep telling it to the players, if you are a world champion or if you're multiple world champions, also you should look the glass as only half full, and you should try and fill the rest of the glass. And that's what your attitude should be when you get onto the court. Because whatever you want to achieve more and more, then there is hunger, you're thirsty, you want more, you want to achieve more. These are big, important things. But the moment you step outside of the badminton court and you come out, then you have to count your blessings. And that shift of perspective is very, very important. I think we will need people who are on field, on the ground, in the workspace, who are really pushing themselves. And the moment they get out at home, you want them to be relaxed, to be friendly, to be jovial, and to actually count what they have rather than think about what they don't have. Whereas on the field, they have to think of what they don't have and actually try to fill that up. But the moment you come out, you have to count your blessings and see the glass as half full. And that shift of perspective should happen very, very quickly. We should not dwell on both of these things on the other side. And that would be a big problem.
No, I think that's great. I think switching roles, appreciate the lack while you're in midst of, pursuing excellence, and then appreciate the abundance. I think the minute you kind of come back, that role switching is very difficult, but I think very, very essential. You've dealt with folks all over the world. I mean, whether it is in, team championships, Thomas Cup, Uber Cup, or, individual events, right? And you've dealt with so many countries. What about Indian mindset? I mean, is there anything specific about Indian mindset here that would help us, these times of crisis to overcome, better than other citizens around the world? Any perspectives on that?
I think for us, still somewhere at the back of my mind, and I'm totally not an expert on this, but I just feel that at the back of our mind, somewhere the law of karma, the astrology bit, and some of these things could actually be beneficial for us in saying it's okay to actually stay back and wait for our time to come. That's the kind of mindset we would have rather than the restless kind of mindset from a Western ideology. But in general, I think I've seen adaptability being the most important thing. And adaptability not as a medicine, but as a kind of friendly thing. It's okay in the sense this is a problem which I have, and I will adapt myself. So the road to success is not like a straight rope, or it's like a thread to success where you actually navigate the paths. And today for maybe 3 months, maybe 2 years, 1 year, we don't even know. So at these times, I think sometimes it's good to actually just stay grounded, stay and say "Mera time aayega," the kind of words, and then you just relax and enjoy what you have, because that would be very important. To be in an uncomfortable position for too long is not possible. So I think acceptance and adaptability with enjoyment, with saying, okay, this is what I have, and I will celebrate what I have. And that would be very, very critical. And somewhere in India, I think that element is built to us in a sense that either it's our family structure or our mindsets of karma and stuff. I think somewhere we could actually be in an advantageous position from a mindset is what I would think.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, right? It's kind of really action versus reaction, right? I think only when you when you're aware and accept and acknowledge, you move into a zone of action. Otherwise, you're always, in denial as to why did this happen now, and why did it has to happen to me, which is not going to be obviously very healthy. Any certain guidance or techniques? A lot of these are young people, right? And Chaitanya, in the beginning talked about the millennials. Like the way I read about Spanish flu, I have not, kind of experienced that, right? I read about the world wars. I have not experienced. Whereas a dot-com crash or a 9/11 or even the financial meltdown, I've experienced those, right? So for many younger people, they might not have even experienced, the dot-com crashes of the world or even the earlier events. Any techniques or any guidance to them on how to handle this situation? Kind of if you were to peel the banana for them.
I think a couple of things is, for a lot of us, it's very important to just slow down. And one, acceptance, but also do something which actually helps us grow, because that's our nature is to grow. And we cannot possibly look at, say, growth outside all the time, but actually our inner growth, just a physical standpoint. If you were to look, and many of us could say, I want to become fitter at this point of time. If I'm doing 5 push-ups today, I will do 6 by the end of this. And by the end of this, I'll get stronger. So somewhere to have targets and goals is very important. And for me, what really helps is if you actually have physical targets and you're able to quantitatively measure what your growth is happening, that actually switches your mind of a lot of things. So one is something like that. The second is learn something new, and which could be completely opposite. And for a lot of us, and in sport, we talk about this profit and loss. People and players who do everything for profit and loss are like cancer. It just is too much to handle. I think life and our mindset cannot be profit and loss. Everything is not transactional in nature. Like, what will I get out of it? I think that is something which we need to get away from, that mindset. Just do something which has no benefit and learn something which has no value just because you like it. Do physical exercise just because you are enjoying it. Whether it's close your eyes and dance or do activity which connects your mind and body. I think all of these things are beneficial. And from a HR perspective and at these times, I think and this is something which really helped me, because when I believe that the other person's intention is bad, then I have a grudge against him, or I see it as a bigger problem. Whereas I see the other person's competence is bad, then I can help them out. So I think to put that point across to people in our organizations also would be very, very important, because it's not that we want to be cutting salaries or whether we want to be taking certain steps to help us, but we really want to help you out. But this is what the issue is. And from both sides, I think as a personal thing, this is what has helped me, is that when somebody has, and in the last few years, there have been lots of cases where in a public space, you will have criticism on various things. But I think to be saying, okay, it's not their intention to hurt me, but they just hurt it unintentionally, or they're not competent enough to understand it, so it's okay, kind of a thing. So when you let go of that negativity, then there's a lot better feeling which you actually have. So for the millennials, I would say, I think stick and enjoy smaller things in life, and small things would be like, and make the body a little more uncomfortable. If you're used to a 20 degrees and a AC, just put it to 21 and 22, and just see if you can go through without a fan for a night, or without get a lot more sweat and do little more physical activity. Just enjoy the discomfort as well, because I think that's something as a challenge which will make us stronger.
So I think, Gopi, I mean, these are definitely, golden nuggets. I must tell you, I've learned how to cook great paneer butter masala. I'll cook for you one of these days. So I used to be in a denial mode when you don't have household help. Obviously, everybody talks about this, right? One of the big benefits of living in India is you have some helping hands. But early on you're in a denial mode, then you roll up your sleeves and you say, I would enjoy this. And, I would get going, and you start, focusing on it, and you start enjoying it. But, it's definitely, one aspect I want to talk about. I think there are lots of people in our audience, right, who grow from individual contributors to managers, and then managers to eventually leaders, managing mid-sized to large organizations. How do you make that graceful transition, from more of individual contributor, then it's all about you, how you perform, versus now if you're leading a team or even leading an organization, how do you transition to the other side of the table? Or what did you do in terms of when you moved to the other side of the table? How is it different from being an individual player, who's going to be one of the best, to now I got to coach a bunch of people and I need to take care of all of them so that they excel. So what does that transition, mean, and what are the things that one needs to do?
Sateesh, when I actually won the All England, and the few years before, and I actually traveled to many places. I learned from different coaches. I traveled to many places, and when I won the All England, I was sitting down. The reflection was that neither was I the best badminton talent around, nor did I have the best of facility, but still managed to win. So for me, it was like I learned a lot of things in my life through trial and error. And over time, what it did was actually I knew what worked, what didn't work, but actually I won the All England at 27. Whereas if I knew what the formula was, I probably would have won a few years earlier. And I was loving the fact that I knew what it takes to win at the world level. This was the year 2001.
Right.
And then I had my 4th surgery on my right knee. This was an overuse injury because I had put too much pressure. After 3 knee surgeries, I had put too much pressure on my right knee, and that gave way for an overuse injury. And I had this great formula which I knew would work. I didn't have a body which could actually support it. And I just got into or jumped into coaching. And that's how the jump happened. In fact, there's one tournament which I played in 2004, where I was partly coaching, partly playing. And then some of the players whom I coached, I defeated. And the player in me wanted me to win. The coach in me wanted me to lose. And by the end of the tournament, I had decided this is the last time I will ever compete. And I actually, immediately after the tournament, the emotion was so high that I just stopped playing and jumped into coaching. And the one thing which I realized very quickly was because players were very different, and I was coaching a bunch of them, whether it was Kashyap, Kashyap was the oldest of that group of 25. He was 16. There was Saina, there was Sai Praneeth, there was Guru Saida, there was Sumit, Sindhu was 9. I think this entire batch of young kids, and each one was different. And my thinking was that it's not, and as a life of a player is something really wonderful, because your life is super focused. And suddenly, because every question for a player is asked against one standard question. Like if you want to eat something, you just ask, is it good for my sport? If you want to go somewhere, you ask, is it good for my sport? Every question comes up to you, and the answer on the other side is it good for my sport? And if it's a yes, you take it. If it's no, then you back off. But then when I became a coach, I realized that it was exactly the same. But now the mirror was on the other side. So every time a player came up to me, I would ask, is it good for him or her? And that actually shifted my entire perspective. So for me, that shift of perspective was very, very important, because all the time it was me, me, me. And then suddenly when I moved the mirror the opposite side, it was whatever is good for the player is what I'll do. And that actually has been the biggest success in my transition from being a player to a coach.
No, that's amazing. Chaitanya, I know, even Darwinbox has grown. I see you on mute, Chaitanya. So, as a leader of an organization like Darwinbox, what parallels do you see? I mean, in terms of kind of that transition. Early on, the founders or everything, right? I mean, you're selling, you are the receptionist, you are the cooks in the kitchen. To all of a sudden now you grow, and you're an organization that's catering to hundreds of customers around the globe. How do you transition?
Yeah. So, Sateesh, one important thing is, like Gopi said, probably this is a common element in any company that is reasonably successful. You need to go ahead with the purpose. I mean, you cannot start a company and grow it with the profit and loss in mind. Truly, companies that are started and grown with purpose in mind will eventually become successful. Now, if you don't start and continue with that kind of intention, definitely you won't even exist today. When you grow and scale up, how do you ensure you kind of you kind of make sure a lot of people, like 300 or 400 employees, that are working, they also get the same thing. They also get the purpose for which you are building the organization, and they're also working towards the purpose rather than treating the relationship with the organization as a transaction. So that is the biggest challenge. And how do you sustain that in times like this? But ironically, these are tough times are when you actually stand up as a team. You become really a close knit as an organization. That is where you need to provide very effective leadership. I think in that sense we are quite fortunate. So whether it is at the time of the crisis or before that, we always had our purpose in mind and wanted to build a world-class product from the India. And in that sense, there is nothing much changed in terms of the way we operate or we work during the crisis. It only made us probably stronger and much closely knitted. And we are very, very confident. We come out of this crisis more muscular and stronger.
Great. Gopi, in India, almost every country in the world find their professional athletes, and then there are these great championships that are happening in different kinds of sport. But then so many citizens enjoy playing sport, irrespective of whether they're competing at a professional level or even at a high performance level. What's the impact, COVID-19 impact on sport, and what's future of sport going to look like, at least at this point of time?
I think for the moment, for many sport, other than say the football leagues and stuff, for us, this amount of break is okay, because many a times players who are professional would want to have a rest and recuperate for the future. And they always complain about tight schedules. So for badminton, I would say for many sports which have packed calendars, and also some of the sports where they continuously train, uh, I think this is a welcome break. But yes, it affects professional teams, it affects the finances bit, and a lot of things at the grassroots level. If the lockdown continues or if sport gets affected beyond a point, then the coaches, the groundsmen, the people who are involved with manufacturing of this, I think they will start getting affected. The people at the second tier who would play, say, domestic tournaments for their livelihood, that starts getting affected. So it is tough times for sport as well. And we will see, if the lockdown continues, that a lot of people will face problems. But having said that, I think life and health is more important than sport. And I know who said this. They said sport is the most important thing of the least important things. So I think from that perspective, I think today, uh, for entertainment, for passion, for human grit and spirit, I think sport is very critical. So getting back, and hopefully some sports will get back with no viewers on the field. I think that could be a new normal. We should look at different ways. I think the number of people traveling across the country and the world to play tournaments could be curtailed into getting small pockets of people playing in isolated places repeatedly over time, which would be like, say, leagues which are held within a place where 5-6 teams come. The place is quarantined and they keep playing with television and internet as major audiences. That could be a possible case. But I think at these times, I think the role of sport and innovation in sport becomes even more critical, because I think for all of us, physical education, physical literacy, movement, exercise, I think these are very critical in boosting ourselves mentally and physically. I think more than ever, I think it's important that each individual, at whatever stage in life he is, it is very critical that they can actually be the best of what they can be physically. And to grow those boundaries is important, because there's a lot of pleasure and happiness you get by doing it. And it could not only be sport or trade, but it could be dance, it could be music, it could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be sport, it could be bodybuilding, running, walking, cycling, anything. But anything which connects them and gives them a happiness on the physical side is very critical in these times, because otherwise it could just be too depressing. And I would still go back and repeat it one more time, that I think all of us who are adults should make some exercise which is quantitative, which can grow. Like even a yoga, we can get better at the asanas, and that is growth. And anything which grows. So it's not like I'm walking for 30 minutes, but I think how much you walk for 30 minutes. I think if that goal is there, I think we'll be driven and our life will have a purpose. And that will be really fun, because at this times of uncertainty, that's something which we can actually do in less amounts of space.
No, I think that's great. I can go on and on, Gopi, but conscious of time, I think it will open it up for Q&A, and I think people will benefit a lot more asking you the questions, that are kind of running through their mind. Let's open it up for Q&A.
Sateesh, we already got a lot of questions. We will filter out a few and ask in the interest of the time.
Go ahead.
Gopi, there are a few questions on a similar line. This is something even I heard when I was back in college, and I found it very inspirational. So when you pursued and doing well in badminton career, it was not a very, very lucrative career back in those days, at least badminton as a sport. And when you won All England, things changed all of a sudden. we heard you were sort of flooded with a lot of opportunities to advertise for certain beverage companies, but you apparently denied, saying you don't believe in them, they are not healthy. So it was a very, very a bold and not an easy call to take. It's back in those days. So how was your mindset back then? What helped you to take such a tough stand?
As a kid, when I was growing up and I was playing my initial tournaments, I used to be very angry on court, and literally they would call me the McEnroe of badminton. And as time went, as my injuries, and I come back to it because I think my injuries have been really, people have come back and said, you would have been a great player if you didn't have the injuries. But the honest truth is that if not for the injuries, I would not be the player I was, or the coach I am, because my life, actually, I learned so much from those tough times. So at those times, lying down on bed, there's not so much television, mobile phones then. So around 94, all you could do was read books. And I started to do a lot of breathing exercises, got interested in yoga, got interested in meditation, visualization. And around 95, 96, I just didn't, I was very conscious of what I was eating, and I didn't have a soft drink since 1997. So when this offer came to in 2001, it was the easiest in my mind to actually say no to, because for me, something which I didn't do, I didn't want myself to be responsible for any kid who picks it up and says, I am drinking it because Gopi is drinking it. And that was too much for me to handle. So that singular point was the decision maker. And it wasn't a tough decision at all. It was a very simple, easy no.
Chaitanya, on the lighter side, Gopi is a brilliant management guy. By just letting that opportunity go, I mean, he's created a bigger brand.
So, that is true. That's true. Sateesh, next question is actually for you. Again, a few people asked a similar question. They're asking, the current crisis is probably something that is comparable to what we've seen in 2000, the dot-com bust, especially in tech space. As an investor with a very keen focus on tech sector, and back in those days, it was almost a cold freeze, right? I mean, for 4 years. So, what is your perspective on the sector as a whole in the current crisis?
So quickly, Chaitanya, in terms of 2000 and even 9/11, though they happened, right? 2 consecutive years. I mean, they were nothing like this actually. 9/11 was more for US, right? And 2000 was for dot-com bubble just in the valley. Today, if you really look at, there isn't any nation or there isn't any sector that is not impacted. And if you really look at, normal times, quantitative easing helps because you push money into the economy and people consume more and production increases and you're back to normalcy. But in today's time and age, you've got to keep people at home, quarantine them, but still need to produce, which is very, very difficult problem to kind of solve. And I keep saying that I wish if COVID were to happen 10 years from now, we would have seen drones already delivering supplies, essential supplies. You would have seen robots in ICUs in kind of mass deployment, and then smart cities and smart factories operational without huge human intervention. But unfortunately, while we are testing all these technologies, this situation has happened. I'm a firm believer that I think we're going to see new technologies, address many of the future problems. And as a pandemic, we also have to be aware this is the 3rd pandemic cycle, right, in the last 20 years. We've seen SARS, the H1N1, and now this. Even if you don't consider Ebola and Zika because they were more localized, this is kind of the fifth pandemic cycle in 20 years. So I am a firm believer, while the pain is imminent, the next year or two, in terms of for our existing portfolio and the kinds of deals that we would look at. But entrepreneurs are resilient. Entrepreneurs change the world. Entrepreneurs dream something that's impossible. So my belief is that we are going to see a new set of ideas and technologies that will all be funded, and you will see 5, 7, 10 years from now, when you kind of look back, you'd see the greatest of the companies taking birth during these times of crisis. But next 3-6 months, it's going to be painful.
Thanks, Sateesh. Helpful. Gopi, again, there are a plethora of questions. People want to know, and slightly unrelated, your personal fitness regime in these days, and any specific recommendations for them.
For me, I think from my playing days till now, I think Surya Namaskar has been one of the best exercises in short place. I also do breathing, some intense breathing, and push-ups as an exercise is great. Burpees are good. So for me, in the morning, we still manage to have training sessions for the athletes in the morning and evening. So we are still managing about 11 sessions a week, morning and evening, through online sessions. So I end up doing, say, about an hour and 15 minutes of workout along with the students in the morning. And it normally involves a lot of stretching, which is fundamentally Surya Namaskar plus additives, and push-ups and breathing as part of it. So that's the main part. But for me, I think if I have to prioritize, I would say exercise. Sunlight is something very critical. I think players, we as badminton players, find it a problem. But I think in general, across the board, I think all of us are deprived of enough sunlight. I think sun is something which is very, very important in these times. So don't lose an opportunity to exercise, and don't also lose an opportunity to get sunlight.
Awesome. Thanks, Gopi. So another question again, a lot of people are drawing parallels to team management from the experience of coaching athletes or sports people. So they're asking a couple of questions. One is sometimes, you groom them, you coach them well, and, they reach a particular stage, then similar to good or best employees in the organization. So all of a sudden they choose to leave you, especially during the times of crisis. How do you manage that? And second, some people you would have thought, okay, they do well, but eventually they come out second. So is this probably something wrong with our judgment? So how to deal with those situations?
I think very, very important questions as coaches, as parents, as leaders. I think this is something which is emotionally the most draining part of it, because you groom somebody and then you expect them and you plan something, and suddenly things don't plan out the way you want. There's one example which is from a Canadian ice hockey coach, and he gives it's very interesting. I think I found it very apt to remember this. Students, I could say probably employees or kids, all of them are like players, are like small birds. You have to hold them in your hand, and you have to hold them correctly. You can't hold them too tight, or you can't hold them too loose, because if you hold them too tight, they suffocate, and if you hold them too loose, they fly off. So you have to be careful enough to hold them just right so that they stay and they're comfortable. But whether they stay or whether they'll fly off. The reality is that they will shit in your hands. This is what he had said. So I think sometimes we have to be prepared to be emotionally hurt and move on. And it's important to plan for failure. I think people talk about planning for success, but I think it's important to plan for failure, and you have a safety net for failure. It is important that we actually do that. But I think to forgive and forget and to keep moving on and to be childlike and saying it's okay and then move on is, I think, which is very, very important. To let not, and this is something which my dear friend Pradeep always says, it's like, do not have regret of the past or anxiety about the future is something which is very, very important. And to be comfortable and be in the present moment is what our goal should be to actually look at.
And Gopi, another question. This is about handling the whole criticism part. Generally, how do you handle criticism? Many a times is unwarranted and without having anyone or without having you at the call.
Sorry, I didn't get your question, Chaitanya.
So how do you handle criticism?
Yeah.
It's again, many of the times I try, I'm not on social media, and I don't see so much of newspapers. So I kind of protect myself from influences which are not needed. But having said that, you still manage to get feedback from people or get criticism from people. For me, it's okay. And I think if our intentions are right and we believe in it, I think we should move on. And over time, I have seen things. Initially, when these things happen, you would be almost like, why did it happen? I didn't want it this way. Or you were kind of wanting to defend yourself. But later, I think it's important that the people whom you believe in, who believe in you and your family, if they think that you're right, it's good enough. And for our protection, I think the people who are our bosses, they need to know that we are right. I don't think the rest of the world really matters in that. I think that's what is realized. But many of these things just pass away. And we just have to just stick on and be in that uncomfortable position. The longer you stay, the better you are. That's what probably resilience or grit would mean. But I think to stay in those uncomfortable positions without doing any stupid mistake is, I think, what is critical.
And Gopi, from your experience of working with certain coaches when you were on the field playing, and later your last years as a coach, so what are certain key attributes that are required in a good coach? So which probably is also relevant for being a good leader or a manager in the organization.
First, I think would be fairness. I think that's something which is important as a coach. And whoever, and I've had coaches at various levels, and I've learned so much from them. My first coach was Hamid Hussain sir. He never taught me in a traditional sense how to hold a racket or how to hit a toss. He never told me any of that stuff. But the greatest thing which he taught me was to love the sport. That was very important at that point of time. I didn't come to the stadium because I loved a racket and a shuttle and badminton. But the reality was you loved the stadium and you loved coming there because of the coach and because of the atmosphere here. So I think as a coach, I've learned from him that as a grassroots level coach, it is important that the kids love the coach and come to the coach. So positive feedback and giving them a lot of time I think that was very, very important. The warmth, affection, that is important. My next coach was Arif Sir. And Arif Sir was a phenomenal disciplinarian. For him, we could actually set our watches with his coming. And that is how he was. He was like absolute disciplinarian, very clean habits. He expected us, if 50 was the number, he wanted us to do 50. And he would be really strict with us. I would think that I learned discipline from him. So many of the times as coaches, as parents, as leaders, I think kids, and this happens with kids the most of the kids play like the coach. They're not listening to the coach. They're seeing. And I think that's an important thing as leaders, as parents, as coaches. I think the employees are not listening to us. They're seeing us. I think to do the right thing is more important than actually saying the right thing. That would be very important. This is from Arif Sir, I think. And my third coach was Prakash Padukone. I think you need role models. You need people who you want to emulate. And when you reach that level also, you want to see how they behave. And that for me was perfectly Prakash Sir. I think to actually have role models, to have people, companies which you want to emulate and which you look up to, and which push you to achieve greater heights. I think that is what is important. So that I learned from Prakash Sir and my stay with him. And my fourth coach was Ganguly Prasad, and he was more like a friend. So you need people whom you can share your experiences, you can talk to them, you can together plan out things. And that was what Ganguly Prasad Sir was for me. So I think each of these things, when I look at a player, when I'm looking at a small young player, and I want to give them a great bit of encouragement for them to love the sport and come back. If it's an intermediate level player, I want them to see that I'm disciplined and then follow the discipline and follow the work ethic. And if it's the next level player, you want to be the inspiration for them in what you've done and how you lead your life. And somewhere it's important to sit together as a friend and jointly plan and plot things against the opposition. That's something you would want to do. So I've learned a lot of things from looking around me. And I've been very, very fortunate that God's been kind, that I've got these people in my life who actually from whom I've learned a lot.
Thanks, Gopi. Last question. So again, slightly unrelated, but there are a lot of relevant questions. How do you choose your students among hundreds of people that are probably applying now? And how do you get a sense of a player's potential on who could be the next star?
For the longest period of my life, that's how I looked at a problem. I would look at 10 kids and then say, where's the talent? And how would you find that? In 2015, I actually encountered a strange experience where I threw a shuttle to a kid and she dropped the shuttle. And I was a bit annoyed walking off. I said, forget it, and then moved on. But then she came up and asked me a question, sir, teach me how to catch. And that changed my entire perspective of coaching. Because I think for all of us who ask this question, I think we need to really introspect and say, am I asking the right question by saying, is he or she talented? Or believe that he or she is talented. And the word talent identification could be changed with the word talent mapping. Because when you are talking about mapping, then we are not saying that there is a problem with or the person on the other side, but actually the onus is on us to ensure that we find out what he or she, his or her talent is at. And as an employee, as a student, as a parent, I think all of us need to be sensitive to this fact and see he doesn't enjoy this role in an organization. He must be something special at something. Let me find out what he is special at and let me put him there. I think that is the question which I really want us to ask before us abandoning somebody and saying he or she is not talented. I think that is something which is critical. So sport has its limitations, sport has its advantages and disadvantages. I could go on to DNA testing and do a lot of things to find out whether there is the right gene or not. But I think nature will flow, and if somebody is really wants to achieve something, they could take various turns and make him into a champion. So I think we need to be a little conscious of this route which we take when we say is he or she talented.
Very nice.
So Chaitanya,
That's pretty much it from over here. Yeah, Sateesh.
Yeah, just maybe let me just recap the whole thing for benefit of at least the walkaways, right? Enjoy the process and the journey. Push yourself into some of the unfamiliar zones. You may not like it to begin with, but you'll enjoy. Don't do anything silly because of boredom. Accept and act. Don't react. Surya Namaskars and push-ups and pranayam. Sunlight is equally important. Plan for failure, forgive and forget, and be childlike. I think, the golden nuggets for me were, the four coaches that Gopi talked about, love for sport, discipline, role model, someone who's your role model, and then someone who you could share experience with. And above all, embrace flow of life. I think you've got to just surrender and let go the resistance, to kind of, sail through this crisis. Yeah, that's at least my recap. Gopi.
I think wonderful, Sateesh. I think thank you very much. It's been really, really nice talking to both of you.
Yeah.
Our pleasure, Gopi. Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us, Gopi. We really learned a lot. It's very, very hugely beneficial for all of us, learning from your experience. In fact, most importantly, first-hand experience. Sateesh, thanks for being with us. So thanks for coordinating the whole thing really well. And thanks for summarizing really well. So,
Great. Good luck to all of us. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Please take care and stay safe. Thank you very much. Thanks, Gopi.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Bye.